Welcome back, it's Brad here. Today we are going to be working on building out this system, which is going to automate one of the most boring processes known to man, and that's searching for jobs on LinkedIn. Now, I've been in the job interview process for say the past 3 months, and I've just acquired a position at GitHub, which I'll be starting in July. And when I was going through the interview process and applying to loads of jobs, one of the things that I always wish was out there was an automation pipeline that would automate the job search process so that I didn't have to spend countless hours in the mornings and in the evenings searching for jobs. So that's exactly what this system does. So first we'll show you it in action, and then I'll break it down at a high level, and then we'll go node by node throughout the system and break it down into its incremental chunks. So let's get to it. Okay, so as you can see, I've pinned the RSS feed so that I don't go over my quota. Now we're running the deduplication process to remove duplicates. We're pulling in from a large language model the company data from online. Then we're going to go into the optimization workflow using a caching mechanism with our cryptographic nodes. Then we're going to generate the cover letter. So now that the cover letter is going to be generated, we're then going to go back around the loop because this is running as a sequential process. So this is for the second job posting now. And now that that's finished processing, we can have a look in our job application docs, and you'll see 2 job applications with a specific skill match. So that's based on the skills and technologies that were in the job description. And we also have information on the company itself and also a cover letter that was generated based on our CV that we've provided and combining that with the mission statement and values of the company. So pretty interesting stuff. And then we've got a link here that you can just click on, hit apply, and then just paste in your cover letter and send that off. So let's go into this Excalibur. So this is what I did before actually designing the system. So you can see kind of my thought process as I went along. So firstly, we have a scheduler. And this is very similar to how a cron job works, but this is just going to be running, say, once per day. And what it's going to do is it's going to use an RSS feed. Now, this is called really simple syndication. And all that means is it's just going to be pulling from a URL, and it's going to be pulling all the updates made to that URL. So we're passing in a LinkedIn URL to our RSS feed, which we're going to be using rss.app here. And this is going to be a LinkedIn URL specified with certain criteria. So whether we're searching for a software engineering job, the price range is going to be 100,000 and above, etc., etc. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to see all the updates made to that URL. So new jobs that are coming in with those filters. And then this is going to be passed into our workflow. Now, we've opted for sequential processing. The alternative is batch processing, and there are pros and cons to both. So sequential processing is a really interesting one. So we're going to be iterating through each of these job postings one by one. Now, the main benefit to that is it avoids race conditions and it's much safer. And also you got to think about the quotas in terms of OpenAI and how many requests they're allowing per minute. Whereas with batch processing, if we're opting for concurrent processing, so processing multiple job applications or job postings at a time, this is going to be a much faster process, but you may hit race conditions. You may also hit quotas within, say, OpenAI. So we're opting for the safest approach, which is sequential processing here. Then we go into the job analysis. So we're going to analyze the job. We're going to extract certain information from the job posting, and we are going to be using a large language model in order to help us achieve this. So the information that we need, things like the job ID, this is going to be the unique identifier that we're going to use in order to carry out a deduplication process, which we'll go into in a bit. We're going to be grabbing the company information, the position, the salary, if it's available, because a lot of postings don't provide that information, which is absolutely ridiculous. Posted date, post URL, skills and technologies that have been provided. This is an extremely important one because we are going to be doing a skill match later on. And as you can see, we've got the skill match value here. We've got brief description of role, years of experience, company information, and then the cover letter that we're going to generate from this. Next, it's company analysis and matching. So we want more information that's not provided within the job description. And by more information, I mean the company's mission statement in order to create a really impressive cover letter. Maybe like what industry they're in, the business model, notable people, question mark. Do we actually need that for this process? Probably not. And then we're going to be retrieving our resume, our CV. And this is going to be stored within Google Drive. So once we pull that, we're going to generate our cover letter by using our CV, the information on the CV, plus the mission statement, the core values, the company information, just to create a really nice humanized cover letter, because no one wants to be writing multiple cover letters per day. And then we're just going to store this in Google Sheets. And ultimately, once that's been achieved, you'll have something like this, with a skill match where 3 and above is going to be a company that you should apply for, and then below 3 is going to be companies that are okay, but you should prioritize the high skill match ones. And then you can just click on these links here, click apply, add the cover letter in, and you're good to go. So at a high level overview, so this is what it looks like. Let me move over here. So initially we retrieve the jobs. We'd have a scheduler here, but this is just to test the workflow, so we've got a manual trigger. So we use the RSS feed. Remember, as I said, this is going to be a LinkedIn URL, which is going to pull all new jobs with a specific set of criteria. We're going to extract the job post in, so this is a code node, just formatting that data that's coming through. Then we're going to carry out a deduplication process. Now, this is a term used within software engineering, and it's so that we don't process two of the same job postings. If there's a duplicate, we're just going to run this no-op operation down here, which is just an empty set node. Moving on, we're going to store the company data. So we've already pulled the job posting from LinkedIn. Now we need to extract and gather more information about the company. So the mission statement, the company overview, the business model, the core values, and then we're going to update the sheets with the job information. Now this is a really interesting part. We're actually implementing caching as well here. Now caching just means we're storing data in order to avoid multiple expensive calculations. And then lastly is creating the cover letter. So we need to merge a lot of these nodes and the information, sanitize the data, so format it in a way that we can use it, generate our cover letter using the mission statement, the values, and also our CV/resume. And then we're going to update the Google Sheet. As you can see, there is a loop round. So this is going to be carrying out a sequential loop as opposed to batch processing, like we mentioned earlier, because it avoids race conditions and rate limiting via APIs. So let's build this out. Let's go ahead and start this. So let's add a manual trigger. So what we need to do is add the RSS feed. So RSS feed. So let's change this to RSS feed LinkedIn. Right, now we need to get a URL here because this is currently broken and it's showing an error. And the way we do that is by using this site called rss.app. What it'll do is it'll ask you to log in or get started. Once you've logged in and provided your credentials and information, we can go into my feeds. As you can see, I've got a couple here. But what we want to do is generate a new feed. So if we go over to here, and if we select LinkedIn RSS feed, now what we can do is go onto LinkedIn and find job postings that we want to keep track of. So here's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at software engineer in London. It's going to be a mid-senior level position. It's going to be a remote position, and the salary, we're going to cap it at 100K. And as you can see, there aren't many results at all here. So we've got two in total, one from Coda and one from Hayes. So what we can do is actually grab this URL and pass it in to this RSS feed generator. But the caveat of this is we need to sanitize this data first. So this is part of the documentation that I've provided within the workflow. Get and sanitize LinkedIn job search URL. So we get the normal LinkedIn job search, which as we said was this. But as you can see, we need to sanitize this. We need to move the current job ID, otherwise it's only going to show one job. And by current job ID, I mean this parameter right here, which is current job ID. And you can tell it's a query parameter because we have this question mark at the beginning. So we need to remove that and the number that's after it and the ampersand sign. Also remove the origin. So this is the UI state tracking and refresh equals true. And so what I've done as a default is replace the GeoID with United Kingdom's GeoID. And then you'll end up with a sanitized URL that looks something like this. And then once you have that, you can copy it. We can go back over into the RSS feed, paste it in here. Please bear in mind that you do have a free quota here. So I have 3 days left on my trial, and I also have 2 of the 15 feeds created already. So if we hit generate, this is going to generate us the RSS feed link that we can then grab. Right, so if we save that, then we get this XML file. We can copy this, and this is what we're going to pass into our RSS feed LinkedIn. So I'm just going to grab mine from the previous workflow that I created, paste it in here. And now what we can do is test this workflow. Perfect, so it's pulled 25 items in there, and that's an issue because we know from looking at LinkedIn, there are only 2 values within here. So it's pulled in 25. And if you have a look at this, so this is the output here, but you'll see that there are just articles. So 4.2 million plus contract software engineer jobs in the United States. Right? We don't need this. So what we have to do is just extract the jobs themselves. So we're going to be using a code node for this. So let's type in code, and we're going to filter through the items that are passed in this input here. We're going to update the title to lowercase because this is case sensitive. As you can see, the title does have uppercases and lowercases. So we need to make them all lowercase for this to work. And then we want to include everything that includes engineer, includes London, doesn't include United States, and also doesn't include jobs in. Okay, so if we run this step, we only get 1 item. So that must mean that the coder job is no longer available. So we're just going to work with this, what we have. So this is the first stage complete. We get that LinkedIn URL RSS feed generated, then we sanitize the data, we only extract the job offerings. And now what we need to do is carry out the deduplication process. So let's go into Google Sheet. What we need to do is check job IDs. So we need to read from the sheet, get a row. So firstly, you need to connect your Google Sheets account. So if you click in here, click create new credentials, this is going to provide you with a redirect URL, in which case you need to go into Google Cloud Console, search Google Sheet, API. You need to enable this first because we want to have access to this API. You'll see API enabled, then you can hit manage, come into credentials, create a credential, OAuth client ID, select the type, it's going to be a web application, choose your name, LinkedIn, search, and this is where you provide the redirect URI. So if you select add URI, go back into the workflow, copy this, come back over here, add this in, and then click create. Now I've already created mine, but then once you create that, it's going to give you a client ID and a client secret, in which case you can add those in here, connect it, and then save it. And then you'll have authorization within Google Sheets. So if we close this, now we can choose from this. It's going to be job applications, and then the sheet is going to be jobs. And we just want to test this step. So as you can see, I've already processed this beforehand. So we have the Hayes job, and then further down would be the coder job. Yeah, so coder job. But what I've gone and done is updated the job IDs within the document. So if we go over to the document, the job ID has been updated. So this will still process even though we have this deduplication in place, because the deduplication is going to be based on the job ID. So we're essentially pulling in all the jobs that we've already processed. We can move this down here. Let's rename some of these. So let's go into code. Let's update this to extract job posting, postings, hit enter. Let's go into here. Actually, we can just space. So check job IDs. Then we're going to provide a code node, so code, and we're going to call this deduplicate. Now I'm just going to paste in this code I created. So essentially this is a comment denoted by 2 forward slashes. So we're going to extract all the job postings that haven't already been processed. Now how we do that is we get existing job IDs. So this is within the Google Sheets, and we're comparing that with the job posts from the RSS feed. And then we're going to filter the job ID. We're just popping off. So we're popping the last value from the link. So if we go into extract job postings, the link here, the last value, the number at the end of this is the job ID, and we need that value. And in JavaScript, you just pop to get the last value. And then we're going to return where our Google Doc doesn't have the same job ID that has been pulled from the RSS feed. So if we run this, we should see Hayes. Yep, Hayes right here. And one thing you can do throughout this process is select P on the keyboard in order to pin this so that you don't have to rerun these nodes, which can be quite time consuming if you have a huge workflow. Then we're going to have an if node, and this is set in a conditional workflow. So if we just say curly brackets and we provide 2 curly brackets, this allows us to actually grab the code JSON dot, and it's going to be job ID. So if the job ID does not exist, then we can process the true branch. If it doesn't exist, then we'll process the false branch. Very straightforward. And in terms of the false branch, it's going to be a set node, and this is going to be a no ops node. So no ops, and it's just skipping the duplicate. So let's update this, rename that, and we're just going to leave this as is. Let's put that there. Okay, so now we've covered grabbing the job postings and also carrying out the deduplication process. What we now want to do is store the company data. So we want to get more company data, so things like the mission statement, the business model, the core values, and we also want to extract all the information from the job posting and store it. At this stage, we're going to add a loop. So loop over items, let's rename this to sequential processing, loop over items. And we're going to leave batch size as 1. Right, we said it would be sequential processing, so 1 at a time. Let's get rid of this, and we actually want to remove that, move this up here, create that link. Now we want to use a large language model in order to extract more company data information. So let's type in OpenAI. It's going to be message and model. Let's rename this to extract and gather company insights. We could use 4.0 mini. Now the great thing about 4.0 mini and 4.0 is that you can actually output the response as JSON, whereas within, say, ChatGPT 4, you won't be able to output the response as JSON, so just bear that in mind. Now we need a user prompt, and then let's just paste this value in. Now what this is doing is it's prompting ChatGPT to think as a job application assistant and provide us with the necessary information we need. Now, if you want the entire prompt, then head over to the link in the description and you can just copy and paste that. So let's wire this up. Let's pin this, run that, and then let's run this. Perfect. But one thing that I noticed we haven't done here is we haven't outputted this as JSON. So if we hit that and test this step again, then it'll be correctly formatted. And this is important for the next step. So as you can see, it's correctly formatted in JSON and it's much easier to read now. So we've got the location, London, England. We've got the skills and tech, so Spark, Hadoop, AWS and Python, job URL, years of experience. So this hasn't been added in, so it wasn't available, financial services, etc., etc. So now let's update Google Sheets. So Google Sheets. So let's append row to Sheets. Connect your Google Sheet account using the Google Cloud Console, append the row. We're going to be choosing job applications as the document and then jobs as the sheet, as we did before. And we need to map each column manually. We can just drag and drop from this. This is the great thing about n8n. This drag and drop process streamlines the workflow so much in comparison to coding. So the job ID, company name, position, skills and tech. So we don't have skills match yet. So we'll just do the role description. Years of experience is empty. We could actually look at improving that later on. Company info. We don't have the coverlet yet. We're generating that afterwards. The job URL. And that looks good. So if we run this and we get the output. So let's pin that. So that's the process of gathering and extracting information from the internet about the company and adding it to our Google Sheet, which we're going to use later on in order to create our cover letter. Next up, we're going to be retrieving the resume and caching the data. So this is going to be Google Doc. So we're going to be getting a document and this Google Doc is stored within our drive. So let me reduce the brightness here. But we have a resume /CV and this is just a random resume that I generated with a large language model. So Alexander Cole lives in London, this amount of experience, these technologies, so a standard CV. And before I forget, let me update this to update sheets with job. And this should be get resume CV. Now we're going to be grabbing the doc ID for this, which we need to pass in here. So the way you get that is you go back into your doc and it will be this unique string here. So all of this right here, if we just copy that, paste it back in here, test this step. And as you'll see, we have the CV being pulled in. Let's go ahead and pin this so we don't lose it. Now we're going to be doing something very cool. And this is the caching mechanism. So we're going to be using a cryptography node. So cryptography node, and let's update this to generate hash. So this is going to be the caching retrieval process. So basically what a hash is it's a unique string. So this is going to be using MD5 hashing algorithm. So it's going to generate a 128-bit string. And what I mean by that is it's going to grab the document ID, the content, and it's just going to combine that into a specific ID. Now you can use more advanced hashing algorithms like SHA hashing algorithm, so secure hashing algorithm 256, which uses 256 bits, but because this is just used for caching, we can get away with using MD5. If you want to know something interesting, it's going to be the unique values that this can generate. So how many unique values can MD5 algo generate? So 3.4 times 10 to the power of 38. So if we used a hashing algo for every second, how many years would that last? So vastly longer than the current age of the universe. There's a huge amount of variation within these, so it reduces the risk of collisions. So what we can do is just grab this content as a whole by using this. So this is looking at the JSON, which is here, and it's just grabbing the entire content. And then property name is data, encoding is hex, that's absolutely fine. When we run this, we're going to get our 128-bit hash, which is down here. So if we pin this. So now that we've created that hash, we need to fetch the content. So we're going to use Google Sheet and it's going to be get rows. So we've already connected the account. Let's update this to fetch cached content. So we're going to be getting rows, and where we're going to be getting it from is OpenAI cache. And we're going to select the cache. Column is going to be hash and it's going to be JSON data. So this is the hash content. So if we go into Google Docs, open up OpenAI cache, turn down the brightness of this. So in here, as you can see, we already have one value that has been hashed. So this is the content that we generated before. Once we generate the content, we will cache it. We will basically store it somewhere so that we don't have to run OpenAI again in order to generate this. And that's what's so important about caching information. It just stops complex calculations from being repeated over and over when it's not necessary. So we don't actually need this because we're running this again. So we can actually remove this because that was from the old version that I did. So now if we run this, As you can see, there's nothing in the response. So what we need to do is always return an output. Otherwise, it's not going to run the rest of the workflow. And let's rerun this, and then you should see the green node. Yep, perfect. Now we're going to have an if node for the conditional render. So it's going to be if, not cached. So if JSON.hash, so the hashed value that we created from before doesn't exist. So does not exist, which is going to be true in this case. Let's pin these. What we're going to do is actually update that cache with the information, the real cool stuff. So we're going to need a set node for this to actually grab that information. We're going to call this get content to cache. We're going to do a manual mapping. Let's add the field. So document ID. So we said we're going to be using the document ID and content. Value, we're going to go back to get resume, and it's going to be this. We also need to create another one. So add a new field, and it's going to be content, which we're going to drag into here. So that's the name. And then we're going to drag the value as well. And that looks good. So if we run this step, we get the information that we want to cache. Now we need to generate a hash again. And this is for the actual storage. So we're going to actually be using this as well. So we can just copy and paste that. And this is going to be for caching, not the retrieval. So let's update that, rename that. Let's unpin this and test this step. Let's see what it generated. Okay, so we have the hash generated. So we're going to use another large language model here. OpenAI, message, a model. So 4.0, there we go. Just like that. We can paste in this prompt. So you're a career assistant. This file is my CV in plain text format. Please read it and return the results strictly as a JSON object with the following keys. So we got the experience, the text summary, programming years of experience, and return the output as JSON. Have that selected. Let's test this step. And we get the result. Cool. So let's pin some of these so that we don't lose the data. Let's bring that back down there. Now that we've generated all that, we need to store it. So let's store it within Google Sheets. Append new row. So we're going to be choosing OpenAI cache. Now we need to add this in. So we've got the hash, the document, and the content. So the hash, not in here. So let's grab that. Let's go back into OpenAI model. Document ID, again, that's not in here. So let's go into here. Document ID. And then for the content, we're going to be using the returned results from the OpenAI node, which we just prompted to sanitize the data. Okay, let's run this test. And what this is going to do is send it over to the OpenAI cache and store it in there. So let's have a look at that. As you can see, we have all the data stored in there as JSON. So we can pull on this next time as opposed to repeating this process and using OpenAI tokens. So it's a real cool, real fascinating way to optimize a process, especially if you're using multiple OpenAI nodes and you want to keep that cost down. So that's the end of the caching process. We just need to hook this up now to generating the cover letter. So let's create a merge node because we want to merge a lot of information. So it's going to be 2 inputs. So we're going to have a couple inputs going into input 1. So it's going to be this false node here and this node here. We're then going to grab information that we extracted from OpenAI up here and also add that in there. Now, why is that? Well, we are merging the job information and the resume. So let's pin this and then let's actually run this to see what we get. We get 2 items, which is going to be, like I said, the job information and the post itself. Now we can sanitize the data. So let's rename this to sanitize. And this is extremely simple. We're just getting the resume data and the job data. And these brackets around here are basically what's allowing us to destructure this, to pull it apart into the resume and job, and returning job as the key, job data as the value, resume as the key, resume data as the value. Very simple stuff. So let's test this step. And as you can see, we've got job and resume. Perfect. Now we have one more OpenAI model to run. I thought I named this as well. So let's actually rename this to structure resume CV. Now we need another one of these. Let's hook this up. Let's rename this to create cover letter. Unpin it because we want to generate a cover letter from this as opposed to structure the resume. Again, we're going to be using 4.0 for this. We need to update this prompt and add a new one in where we're actually a job application assistant. So we're going to be given structured data, passing in all the information, and then we specify the tasks. So skill match evaluation. So in this one, we're going to generate a skill match, which is basically saying if this client or if this user has all the skills and has the correct tech stack needed for this job, then give it a higher number, and also create a cover letter. So cover letter generation. Simplify output. Output content is JSON. Let's test this step. Now bear in mind, you have to work on these prompts because sometimes the output isn't incorrect JSON and it always causes a number of errors. So if you want the entire prompt, go to the link in the description and you can just copy and paste that in and save yourself a bit of time. So now that that's been processed, we can pin these. Let's rename this quickly. Add to OpenAI cache. And the last process is to update the Google Sheet. So Google Sheet, and this is just going to be update a row in the sheet. So let's choose the specific row. It's going to be in job application. It's going to be jobs. And then we need to map them manually. So what we want to do is get the job ID. We also want to update skill match. And we lastly want to add in the cover letter. So in order to get job ID, it's not in this node. We're going to have to go back to sanitize and we have the job ID here. We can drag that over. That's one done. Now let's scroll down. Let's go to skill match. We have a skill match of 5. That's very high. That's very good. So you'll likely be applying for this job. And then let's scroll down and add that cover letter in as well. Let's test this step. Column to match on parameter is required. We've missed the column to match on parameter. So this is just going to be job ID because it's a unique identifier. Let's test this step. Perfect. Now let's have a look within that job application. So as you can see, we have the third one here. So this is the one that we've just processed, Hayes. Let's have a look. It's a senior data engineer. And then let's have a look at the cover letter. So dear hiring manager, I'm writing to express my interest in the senior data engineer position at Hayes as advertised. With extensive experience in data engineering and a proven track record of success, I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team and enhance the data capabilities. It sounds really good. It sounds better than all the cover letters that I wrote over the past few months. Now there's one more process that we have to do, and that's hook this up to create the loop. So if you remember, there was this loop process here. We need to hook this up back into here, because if we have more than one, we would need to process this entire workflow again. And that's why the caching mechanism here is so important, because it basically cuts off these nodes right here. Now, when you're actually testing this and running through it and you've got more than one process here, I would suggest actually using a limiter down here. So we can actually just use one of these. So testing purposes, limiter. And before we hit the sequential processing, we can just add the limiter in here so that you're not consuming loads of resources within OpenAI's API. So that's the entire workflow from start to finish. And I hope you found it useful and I hope you're going to be using this in order to search for your next dream job. And if you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.